episode 34 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Go on, just play one session. It's not like you'll get addicted or anything.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and player, just happy to finally be able to play a game I've wanted to play my whole life, Adam.
And I'm the guy that's faking it until I make it, Mike.
And I'm your lost-looking newbie with no dice or book, Tom.
Thanks for being on, guys. We have a special guest on the show today. As our listeners might know, Tom's been running his own weekly game, and we have one of our players from that campaign on today. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Now, you're a pretty new player in the hobby. How'd you come around to playing D&D?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My D&D experience has started with quarantine. So entered lockdown and needed something to entertain myself, so started looking around YouTube and found Critical Role with, thousands of hours and just started streaming it, got interested, and then thought, you know what, this is something I want to give a shot, and went ahead and texted a few friends thinking that, maybe these guys would be interested, and one of my friends from college happened to be roommates with Tom, who said that maybe he'd be interested in running a game, and that's where we're at.
Nice. Well, now, have you played things like Baldur's Gate video games or any like RPG video games, something that kind of had you already knowledgeable about it, or did you come in fresh?
I came in pretty fresh. The closest things that I've played to this, I would say, before would be World of Warcraft, and then the board game Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Are you a fellow board game enthusiast, Mike?
Yes, I would say it came on a little bit later in life. The last 5 years, though, I've been pretty fanatical about them.
Excellent.
And I will say, quarantine is killing me with it.
Yeah, it really is. Well, hopefully in a few months, we'll be able to look back and say good riddance to 2020. But now, Tom, is a bit serendipitous here that you were in a group you had mentioned about wanting to DM your own game at some point. You had even started DMing with a couple of us from the group. How great was it that suddenly out of the blue, you got, 4 people ready to play the game?
I think I still feel like I'm trying to play catch up, like I'm in over my head. Like it's like, oh yeah, cool. Sure, we'll do this. Let's get on this. And then I was right before the recording the podcast right now. I was actually like building maps and laying out things for our Monday campaign. So I feel like I'm constantly trying to play catch up. Yep. It's like a part-time job.
And you've been doing it for what, 5 months now? 6? Something like that?
Well, between
we started, I believe, the first week of June, because it was actually the week after my daughter was born.
Wow.
Actually, never mind. It would have been the very end of May then. Yeah.
Wow, you started a D&D campaign immediately after having a child. That is brave, my friend.
I have a very understanding wife.
Yes, you do. God bless her. My goodness. Well, hey, some of us, when it comes to D&D or tabletop role playing, might be fresher than others, but you never really forget your first time at the table, starting a new campaign, learning the difference between checks and saves, figuring out how to calculate AC, DC, and what the heck RAW is and why people get so riled up about it. So that's what we'll be getting into today, the lifeblood of our hobby, new players getting into tabletop role playing. Now, Tom, what was your first session experience like? What were some things that you thought were memorable about it?
So for me, I kind of like Mike was kind of vaguely interested in the hobby, got into like Critical Role and Dice Camera Action and several other podcasts and streamers and everything that talked about it. And it seemed interesting and a bit over my head. But I found a local game shop, in the before times, that would do Sundays with Dragons in the basement of the comic book store, and it felt very cliche, but I figured, sure, I'll try it. And I was a bit hesitant because I had tried to get into the Magic the Gathering fandom and was completely turned off because of the toxicity of it, essentially. And showed up expecting to basically be kind of disappointed and leave, and walked into this massive table full of people with, again, a lost newbie with no dice or a book. I had a pen and paper because I knew that's basically what I would need at the start of it. And they all looked at me, knew I was a newbie, and 4 people offered to help. I was offered dice. I was offered a book to borrow. A guy who probably wasn't the most social. Like, he was that stereotypical nerd with the glasses and the hat and like the long hair that was kind of greasy, and nicest guy I've ever met. And he's like, okay, so you're clearly new here. What games do you enjoy? Let's flip through the book. What would you like to make? And walked me through step by step while the DM was prepping for the session, and got me into a character. It was Darman, a human monk that I made, and it kind of the rest is history. It started me off onto getting to enjoy the game and getting to learn it just because of that initial welcoming.
Yeah. And I just want to pop back a little bit because it looks like both you and Mike kind of got the itch from stuff like Critical Role. And I just want to say to all those assholes out there who keep talking about how Critical Role is ruining the hobby because it's setting unrealistic expectations, that's a load of shit, because we have new players because they saw Critical Role and wanted to get into it, and they didn't run away after the first session and be like, oh no, this isn't for me. They stuck in it. They love it. They're in it. And things like Critical Role have had a huge impact in bringing in new players to the hobby. Now, Mike, I want to turn to you since Tom is the DM for your game, so he'll have firsthand knowledge of this. The first time you sat down at the table, or I should say Zoom, and did your first session, what was that experience like, since it was so recent?
I mean, it definitely, it was fun, and it was a different way of just interacting with people that I've known, some of them I've known for years, and it was just fantastic. And especially, I would say, coming off of a couple months of quarantine, it was great just being able to sit around the proverbial table, and just hang out with people. And it was definitely interesting. I feel like the first time figuring out the roles that, who was playing what role in the party and that. And my first character is a war cleric. And I came in thinking, well, I'd probably be more of a frontline fighter in that. And all of a sudden I'm in a group with a barbarian and a fighter. And it's like, okay, I'll get in the back line and have you two meet shields up here. And yeah, so it's just really interesting. Yeah. Figuring out who actually has the better charisma, okay, who's going to be the face of the party and everything like that. It was just entertaining all around.
Well, I got to give you props, Mike, because I came into this campaign late. Like, I don't know how many months you guys had gone before I got in there, but whenever I was introduced to everybody and kind of, sat back and watched everyone play, I had immediately pegged you as the veteran, as the person who knew the rules, who knew their character inside and out. And when Tom said, no, this is his first ever tabletop game, I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. Like this, like you did your homework. So I have to give you respect for that. You definitely know what you're doing at the table. Now, the interesting about this thing about this group and what I loved about it is when I came in, you guys remind me a lot of some of my friends back in college, and not your stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons nerd. And that's what's great about it, because you get these experiences with people who you would not expect to be into something like Dungeons and Dragons. And we got 3 people who are into it, who you would, we all watch Monday Night Football, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Like that's not your prototypical D&D player. So it's really cool to see this kind of stuff happening. My first session, like I can't remember my first session. There's been a lot of failed campaigns, but the first one that stuck was back when Anthony invited me to this group that we're in now, and I remember being horribly nervous because the rules were really hard to understand. I didn't know what I could do, but the benefit of that is a lot of times I said, I'd like to do this. Can I do it? And that kind of opened it up for the DM to be like, sure, yeah, you can try that and see what happens. And that's kind of how I learned the rules, and being at the table with a bunch of people that knew the rules really well helped. But I remember coming back from that first session and I was immediately hooked. Like I knew like this was going to be something that stuck, because there was no way I was going back to not playing D&D ever again. But so yeah, I think we've all had some memorable experiences, and our goal is to make sure as many people have that memorable experience as possible. But for now, let's get into some questions for the week. Our first post comes from Reddit user Fenrirbane, who asks, what are good session 0 questions for players and GM to discuss? Hey, I'm helping an internet friend start a new campaign in D&D 5e with a session 0 coming up next week. I'm trying to compose a list of questions for a Google survey for players and the GM to fill out, or at least consider prior to session 0. I'm looking for questions that are more than just yes, no, but most like me to least like me. For example, which quote describes you more? I prefer combat to be tactical chess game, or I prefer to treat combat as a cinematic roleplay, and provide a range between the two for the players to select. So kind of a Likert scale kind of thing. So I feel questions like, which do you prefer more, combat or roleplay, are really reductive and fail to highlight the different aspects and ways you can approach both. In the games I DM, a lot of roleplay happens in combat encounters, and roleplay doesn't necessarily mean characters acting to all people. Any good questions y'all know that would really help the players and GM open up and understand what everyone wants from the game, and even help new internet friends get to know each other better. So, all right, Tom, a few months ago, you started the campaign that Mike's in. What session 0 questions would have been useful for you to ask as a newer DM?
So for me, getting a baseline of character experience, I think would be the first way to start off, because then you know what you're working with. Because you have a bunch of veterans, then those more, as he put it, reductive questions might work a bit better because they already have a context they're working from.
Yeah, new players don't know what they want yet, right?
Yeah, so I feel like first question needs to be, how experienced are you with D&D or TTRPGs? And you could reference it a range of, I've played several sessions, I'm a newbie, I've never even touched dice before. Go from those ranges, and then once you have that starting point, you can go to more of a, well, if you're less experienced, where is your knowledge base? Are you a gamer? Do you like, first person shooters? Do you like board games? Do you like RPGs? And then kind of get that baseline, because then the more the GM understands the player's perspective, the more they can then indirectly tailor the campaign to match that. Because like for me, as an example, I came in as a DM. I started with, you, Adam, Steve and Sarah, just doing like a bit of a quick thing to get my feet wet. And with our group, it's all heavy role play, and there's a lot of like extra stuff that's separate from like the game itself that goes on. But then coming in with Mike and Nathan and Andrew as new players who had not experienced like a tabletop game before, there was more of a mindset of less on the role play, more on like a from their basis of video games or media, and seeing those perspectives differ. I think it would be a good thing to get that idea out of the way first.
Yeah, I got to ask you, Mike, like the first time I came in and I was doing Narok's voice, like how hard did your eyes roll when I did that?
Oh, they were rolling hard.
Well, Mike, looking back at that first session that you had with Tom, were there questions that could have been asked that you would have liked to have been asked, basically to kind of get a better feel for what to expect, or do you think things were good?
I think things were pretty good. One of the things I think would be anything from like how much downtime in the game do you want? Since we started, I feel like we've had like one like stretch of time where it's like, okay, you know what, we're gonna have like a week downtime. So, if anyone wants to craft anything and that, you can do that. I think that would be, something good to ask too, because there are definitely times that it's like, oh, you know what, I think it'd be nice to kind of go back to the town and take a break, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, this character's girlfriend got kidnapped, so let's go off to save her again.
Yeah, again.
But yeah,
that's actually a good point. Like and that's something that's not just new groups like that. That happens in all groups. That's a great question for any session 0, because downtime, especially with Xanathar's guide that had that section on downtime activities, is really ignored a lot. So that's a great question to be able to ask for a session 0. What else you got, Mike?
I think one of the other things is, and this wasn't something that really had to be addressed with us since a lot of us knew each other already, but especially if you're coming into a group of totally, new people, I think just even asking questions as far as like, what you're comfortable with the level of silliness in the game. There are definitely sessions that we have where it's more in line almost with like a frat party than it would be a D&D commit. I mean, I think it was after like 1 or 2 sessions Tom had to email out rules for what happens when your characters get drunk, things
Tom.
like that.
Oh, Tom.
And then I also think too, even just like speaking of getting drunk, I mean, a lot of us when we play, we're drinking, we're having a good time, and that I don't think it inhibits the game at all. But that's also something maybe to ask also, like, is this something that people are going to be comfortable with? If not, then that's something that probably should bring brought up beforehand, before the game even starts.
And that brings up another great point, that every session 0, especially if you're dealing with people that you don't know, a really smart move for a DM is the what's it called, veils and something. I forget what the other one is, but basically determining what is appropriate within gameplay, what people are uncomfortable with. So when it comes to descriptions of violence or sex or assaults of some kind, like, where is the line for your players? And that doesn't have to be a group discussion. That can be a simple thing. It's blinds and veils, I believe. But it's important to kind of get that down so that the DM knows where those lines are and not to cross them. With video games, we're so used to violence, but there are people who don't want to hear about the gore and viscera and entrails being dragged out of stomachs and stuff like that, and it's a good thing to know. And especially getting into anything sexual related, it can cross the line very quickly. So as a DM, it's really important to know where that line is, and session 0 is a perfect time to get that kind of stuff out of the way. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit there, Fenrir Bane. Would love to hear how that session 0 ends up going for you.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It's time for Potomac RPG News. All right, as some of you may know, there's a D&D board game out there called The Adventure Begins, and it's meant to almost serve as a gateway to the actual game. And right now, it's only $12. Not bad. Austin King has an article over at ScreenRant.com that asks whether actual D&D players will enjoy the game or if it's too simplified to be any fun. So looking through the description of it, Mike, does this look like something that you might enjoy?
Well, I bought it this morning and it's arriving on the 24th. So,
no
yes.
shit! Nice, very cool. Well, what ended up pulling the trigger for you?
Well, I mean, I watched the video that they have of it, and it looks definitely like a really nice. It looks like a game that could be really adjustable. It looks like there's going to be some replayability with it. There is. It looks like you could probably also adjust it on the length of the game depending on how long you want to do it. And I think it's just a nice way to kind of get people into it without having to kind of jump right in. Also, I feel like one of the biggest issues with getting D&D groups together is trying to find someone that wants to DM. And I think this is great that you actually rotate turns DMing during this game. So I will say the one thing I thought that was interesting with it is there's only the 4 characters, 4 classes in here. My guess is probably there'll be expansions at some point to expand that. I hope so. But yeah, no, I'm excited to play it, and I'll probably once quarantine breaks, be pulling this over to a couple friends' house. So
yeah, well, and even I know you got a youngster. It might be a few years, but something to be able to play with the kids at some point too down the line. Tom, how about you? Any interest in this board game for Dungeons and Dragons?
I'm curious. Being playing in a game and also DMing a game, I feel like it's not something I need right now, but I am curious to try it out and see what it can do, especially having in the past during quarantine, and I've had to basically explain the rules of D&D to new players 9 different times. And it's never easy because you're basically starting from scratch. Like you have new terminology and everything. So any kind of gateway into that's easy and doesn't scare people off and it seems manageable to the person, I'm all for.
Yeah.
So I would be interested to see what this could do, because this might be an excellent tool to then indoctrinate more people.
Well, I gotta admit, like, as a board game enthusiast, this doesn't really scratch that itch, just because I think I have a good idea of what the gameplay is like. I do agree though that as a gateway or just as a kind of collector's thing, I think it'd be pretty cool to have this up on a shelf somewhere, and especially at $12, man, what do you got to lose? You might as well.
I mean, I've spent $12 on stupider shit in my life.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I did laugh at the article though when they made the line, explain important mechanics like D&D character alignments. I'm like,
oh no, they did. They did say that.
I was like, I just started laughing. I'm like,
character alignments.
Yeah. So while the game would be good, I'm kind of skeptical about Austin King's perspective on it. But
I will say one thing that I'm interested in actually finding out once I play it is, what's the scalability between 2 and 4 players? Is it going to be impossibly hard to take on some of these bosses with only 2 players, or or is it going to be possible? Do you need 4 players to really get the best benefit of this game? So I think that's going to be something I'm interested to see once I get it and play it.
Yeah, and I also wonder, after you have 4 people willing to play a D&D board game, how long do you stick with that board game before you say, well, why don't we just play actual D&D? So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think this will be a nice lighter fare, especially if it's, let's say it's people who aren't willing to commit to a campaign and want to just, spend a night doing something. I think this is a great idea to get people involved in it, and who knows who you might hook along the way. So we'll have some links up in the show notes if you want to check that out. Again, it's only $12 right now, and it is the holidays, so get on out there and pick it up.
And I mean, every addiction needs its gateway drug. So
exactly, and this is the gateway drug right here. But we're going to take a step out for a moment, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user Mr. Flying Turtles, awesome name, who asks, teaching new players to play online. My current group is probably going to fall through, and I'm thinking that playing online with my 5 other siblings would be a good fit. We all live all over the country. However, they're all new, and I know from DMing that online is not as vibrant, energetic, I guess, as in-person games. Seeing how we're all separated, though, online will probably be our only option unless we drop 2 of the siblings. My question is, what is your experience starting new players using Roll20? Do you find it hurts their first time experience at all? Do you have any tips to make online feel as alive as in person? So, Mike, since this is your first campaign and it happens to be online only, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think playing online has made it easier or harder for you to get into the hobby?
I definitely think it's made it easier. Quarantine and pandemic aside, everyone that we play with is in their 30s, all professionals. 3 of us have kids, so I don't know if it would have been possible to really get into this hobby if it wasn't online. Having it be online, we're able to jump in at 7:30 in the evening, play for a few hours, and then not have to worry about driving an hour home. If I'm here and if my wife needs help with our baby, I can help out. There's been quite a few times that she's assisted us on a few campaigns.
Oh, really? Shit, yeah. I missed that. Oh.
I think that was a little bit earlier before you got in, but yeah, no, there's definitely a few times that we're fighting some goblins and I'm giving my daughter a bottle. So, but no, I definitely think it's great. And the way Tom has it set up, I don't feel like we're losing anything. He has some great maps. We're able to explore it. Yeah. While I'm excited with the prospect of maybe someday doing an in-person game, I think online's huge, and I think it's been fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, how about you? What do you think on this question?
So it depends on. For me, the first thing I see is Roll20.
I know. I was like, no.
Yeah. So I've never run Roll20 before. I've tried looking into it a little bit, but it's very big learning curve. At least on the DM side. So if you're experienced with Roll20 and you got to have it down and you can do that legwork and you can manipulate it, more power to you. I think if the less mental, because the players are also trying to learn the game. If they have to learn digital tech as well, it becomes more complicated and can lead to probably a bad experience. I personally use, most of our groups use mirror boards, which is basically a free whiteboard. It doesn't have all the fancy things like dynamic lighting. So if you move a token that, the lighting will follow, so you don't have to worry about, technically your character can't see because there's no torchlight here or something. So that I've tried messing with several variations, Roll20 and I can't think of some of the other ones, but other very similar websites. And it just gets very tedious trying to learn those. But if you can do that, more power to you. The one thing that I wish that I could do online properly, and I think it would vary, like he said, vibrant and energetic for the game, music. I would love to have functional background music, battle music, stuff like that. I think that would really, really bring a lot to the virtual table, but it's just, I have no idea how to do it properly.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're teaching new players online, the music aspect is, you're absolutely right. It's important and it adds so much. But when it comes to teaching new players, that that's a back burner issue. And you hit the nail on the head when you said Roll20. I would highly recommend against something like Roll20 because of the learning curve associated with it. I mean, I've been on it. I've built a campaign out of it, and it was so, I'm not a dummy. Like I'm not, a genius or anything, but I know my way around computers and apps enough to figure stuff out. It took me forever to figure out how to use Roll20. It was annoying. It was clunky. It was complex. And when you compare that something to something like Miro, which is an awesome whiteboard app, but which I think reflects even better the actual tabletop experience because it's as if you're looking at an actual table. It's so easy. It's so easy to follow and understand what's going on, and you can concentrate on using learning the rules and kind of getting a feel for the game. So, Mr. Flying Turtles, I know you might have an account on Roll20, and that's all well and good, but keep in mind that your new players might have a lot of difficulty getting the hang of Roll20. Might be better to go with something a bit simpler, and definitely have a video chat of some kind, whether it's Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever. To that face-to-face is still important. Yeah, we might be online, but seeing the other people, I think, is a big deal when it comes to tabletop role-playing. So make sure you have some kind of video feed going so people can get to know each other and see each other a little bit. I think part of this game is the social aspect, and even though we've taken that away, in person, you can still have a version of that online. So hopefully that helps out, Mr. Flying Turtles. Best of luck with your campaign with your siblings. Can't think of anything better than being able to play with your entire family like that. That's awesome. So there are thousands of fantastic, weird, and downright horrible stories out there, though, and some are so ridiculous that you question their accuracy. So let's see if you two can figure out the one that doesn't belong in our segment, Say It Ain't So. Welcome to Say It Ain't So, where we see if our two guests can spot the one that doesn't belong. So here's how it'll work. We'll each read a RPG horror story about new players or new DMs. 2 will be true, 1 will be false. It's your job to figure out which one is the made-up one. Pretty simple, right? So you two ready?
Yep.
All right, let's get into it. So each of us have a story that we're going to read here. So let's turn to you first, Mike. Go ahead and give us your RPG horror story.
Okay, this one is My First PC Dies in 5 Minutes. This was my very first tabletop. It was 15 years ago or so I don't have a perfect memory of it. I don't know what system it was, but it was based on the Warcraft games. I made a human rogue. The other 2 players were knight, elf, and orc. I was placed in front of a random house in a field, so I went to go inside, but wouldn't you know, it was trapped. I promptly failed to save and died right there. The other 2 players were fighting each other to the death. Don't remember who if anyone won.
Well, that sounds like an exciting first session. All right, Tom, let's hear yours.
Okay, I'll Just Stand Here, I guess, is the title. Got introduced to D&D by a friend about 5 years ago. First time playing tabletop, but played plenty of video games, RPGs, etc. The DM told me to make a level 1 character. I do my homework and create a decent character. The DM approves. I get to the table and things seem fine for a while. When the first battle comes, the other players wipe the floor with the baddies, doing insane damage. I looked at my character sheet, wondering what I did wrong. I only do 1d6 plus 2 damage. How are they doing so much? Turns out the rest of the party was level 9. Spent the rest of the session doing nothing. Never went back and didn't try D&D again for 3 years after that.
Ouch. All right. Cool. And the third story we have, new player is his own DM. Been having a new player lately. Great guy, very nice type of person. He said he played D&D before. I made a colorful introduction and asked him what he wants to do. I go outside the tavern, stumble over a stone, fall into a deep hole, break a leg, but find a fine magic sword. Proud smirk. I'll explain the concept of D&D again if you allow. So making up his own fine magic sword, not too bad. All right, guys. So those are the three pretty light RPG horror stories, to be honest, compared to what we're used to. So Mike, we'll turn to you first. Out of those three stories, which do you think was the made up one?
I think it's the one that you read. The one that I read actually is eerily similar to what happened to one of my characters the one time when within the first 5 minutes of starting that session, I walked through a door that turned out to be a mimic.
Oh, wow.
And got knocked out. So
nice. Lovely. All right. So you think the fake one is new player is his own DM. All right, Tom, how about you? Which one of the three do you think is the made up one?
I honestly do think that, I mean, I've been there before where people have played the character thinks they're their own DM. I've seen that happen, so it could happen, but I still think that one is the fake one. The player being a DM.
So new player is his own DM. The actual correct answer was, I'll just stand here, I guess. Tom's was the made up one that I made up this morning. The other two are completely true. So both of you guessed wrong. I'm sorry, but a good game of Say It Ain't So. Not too bad. So,
well, the thing is, the level 1 character, I've also played with groups where the DM is adamant that if you start at level 1, no matter if the party's, level 2 or level 20.
That's just stupid. I couldn't imagine being in a game like that and actually sticking around. I mean, how long would it take for you to get caught up? That's ridiculous. Absolutely insane. But anyway, that was Say It Ain't So. Thank you very much, guys. Let's get into our last post of the week. This comes from Reddit user The Real Breakfast, who asks, sample events to help a new player out. Hello, I'm requesting you guys' help. My brother is interested in starting to play D&D, and I want to be able to help him learn the basics easily. I figured the best way to do this would be to talk him through making a character sheet using D&D Beyond and what each stat skill number does, the usual. I also wanted to give him a few example events that I would DM for him to solidify his learnings, like combat, sneaking around, spells, thievery. Only problem is I'm relatively new as well, and I want to make sure I do it properly. I just want to know if there are any resources online for this type of thing or any ideas you guys have that would help. All events would be made for 5e. Let me know in the comments and I'll check them out. Thank you in advance. Okay, this is a good question and one that applies to a situation I'm in right now with a buddy of mine. So, Tom, it looks like The Real Breakfast is looking for almost a tutorial scenario. Any recommendations on this?
So, I wish I would have seen this sooner. Again, having tried to teach multiple people from scratch, everyone from my mother to Andrew or Mike, about D&D and some of the rules and everything. And I recommend going to the D&D Beyond website, and you look at the top tabs all the way to the right. It says Quarantine Resources. The one left of that says New Player Guide. If you click on the New Player Guide, it actually shows you a step-by-step process of not only like the rules, but starting from the beginning. What even is a D&D, and what the dice do, how the DM, what role the DM plays, and creating a character. And it does link you to the D&D Beyond, like how to create your character and everything. But it gives you kind of a step-by-step process. At least, even if you don't necessarily give this to your brother to reference, it gives you a step-by-step process so you don't get sidetracked or distracted of, what to do first. Because I've had so many people take, they're going to start playing D&D and they're like, okay, I got the player's handbook. I'm going to read it cover to cover and then I'll get back to you. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good starting point to at least give you that, because there's a lot of things. It's like trying to teach someone, how to read or how to, speak a language. Like there's a lot of exceptions that you can get really bogged down if you try to worry about details like individual things like thievery or like even doing like simple like skill checks. Like that can get very deep and very heavy very quickly. And I think starting with one thing at a time and getting their feet wet is going to be really helpful. So also giving them information and letting them stew over it and figure it out on their own and then come back to you for the next stage.
Okay. Well, Mike, how about you being a newer player yourself? What do you think would have helped in terms of understanding the rules for you?
Yeah, I mean, what this guy is describing, I think that sounds really interesting. It actually reminds me of the old Age of Empires 2 video game where they actually had the Learn to Play campaign where, each scenario, it gave you another piece of the game. And, I think that's really interesting, especially if you're coming in brand new without having, even watched any videos or anything of people playing. I think this would be good. Just even then you can test out the different classes and figure out which one works best for you, kind of get the mechanics in that. And then even things like, I remember back when I first started watching Critical Role and they would roll initiative and all of a sudden, like everyone just starts yelling out numbers. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And it's like, oh, I'm like, okay, so that's what initiative is. Gotcha. So I think I think anything like that, what Tom was talking about, or making these little like scenarios and having the guy run through it, I think that would be a really good tool.
Yeah, and along those lines, that's exactly what I was thinking, Mike. Like all the video games that we play have a tutorial scenario of some kind to introduce you to the rules, and it's not an information dump. They almost feed it to you, in small bits, so it's easy to understand. So I did a little bit of research, and I found this article from J.R. Zambrano, which I think we had a article from him before, from belloflostsouls.net, and it's a tutorial level, and I'm reading through this thing, and this is great. So after you help the player build their character sheet, it's a super simple scenario where you're like a rookie guard and you're going out with an NPC captain. So basically you're DMing through the captain of this little, rookie guard force. And, it introduces, one skill check, as a perception check just to see, get them introduced to how that works, and then the first encounter against some type of beast to get them used to how that turn order starts and initiative, what that means, and it just and it finishes with a short rest, so they're kind of understanding what the hit dice do and stuff like that. It's really well laid out, and I would highly recommend it. I'll have the link in the show notes to if you want to check it out, because I thought it was the basically tabletop equivalent of the tutorial lesson in a video game, and I thought it was a really great way to go about it. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some stuff that you can do the real breakfast. Hope you have a lot of success getting new players into D&D. But that is going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@PotomacRPG.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/PotomacRPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Mike and Tom. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So, for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Tom.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never stop playing.
So Tom's been talking shit about us this whole time.
Oh, shit.